Okay, this is version 146.2, and the Russian sanctions have been announced. What is kind of lost in the story is that this is actually Krylova and Bogacheva are the ones named. So, as well as the chef of Putin, Prigozhin. So, this isn't really Russians, these are Russian oligarchs. Some of these same oligarchs are going to be involved with Manafort and Podesta. So it's nice to see that their assets are frozen. We still don't know if they're related to the Bogacheva in Florida or the Krylova in North Carolina. But what we do know is this could be a group of Natashas that are women that Putin had trained to actually, basically drug foreign diplomats and so forth. Sometimes, I guess now you can even take it to the next level of poisoning. You had Litvinenko die in 2007. Now it looks like he may have been contacting and talking to Christopher Steele and some of the work they were doing with Bill Browder. So did Litvinenko, that journalist that died, was he killed by a Natasha, a Krylova, or a Bogacheva? I'm going to just use Krylova and Bogacheva in the general Natasha sense. There was a Natasha that I may or may not have known in New York City called Anna Chapman. Was she involved in a team that was actually doing this type of espionage, economic espionage? Drugging the guy and then going into the computer and then taking the disk drive, et cetera, making copies, et cetera. Was that operation going on in New York City? We don't know, but we'll just leave that out there for right now. Was Krylov and Bogacheva, were they Natashas or were they Rostanets? You could even call them a Rostanet if you want. Economic spies, like a Valerie Plame. So this is the follow-up on Will Levy, what talked about. Before, it turns out he was a Navy cop. He'd come up through the Navy ranks. This reminds me so much of the guy who was down in the lobby that one day talking about dog teams. Is this really a recruiting ground for the SES as you kind of graduate and matriculate through the system? We don't know yet. But we did identify a Will David Levy out in Long Island that had a Lamborghini, several BMWs, several Mercedes-Benz, several Porsches, 5 different $1 million houses, 2 in Roslyn, Long Island, 2 down in Florida. They seem that same kind of connection, the VA connection that we'd established before. I can't remember the VA hospital out in Roslyn out here, but there was a lot of fake degrees out here with a company called Exact. That's with an A instead of an E, kind of reminds you with Brilliant. Instead of an A, instead of an A, you put in an E. This one was instead of an E and Exact, you put in an A. So we don't know any of that yet, but it's just sure seems like these identities of these people are being taken. Now here's another person in SES. Again, random choices. Now Anna Hinojosa, now I remember a Ruben Hinojosa who was a congressman on the border of near El Paso. I'm not sure exactly how close. And she's got 27 years. We both know Robin Gritz, but she's in SES. But she's actually in World Customs now. She was with Customs and Border Patrol. This was that famous NATO port of Urenco fame for uranium leaving here, Port of Baltimore with Mark Lambert and going to Brussels. Of course, shipments were coming the other way to Imran's Basmati Rice Company in the Port of Baltimore. Don't know if that's an arms for weapons or arms for drugs situation or not, but something that I want to call to her attention. But this executive women in government position really kind of gave me a start because she's got a job for the sole purpose of advancing women in the executive service. Now, sometimes people call that the SS here for short, as a wink to the SS back in it's sort of a Nazi-ish blood loyalty oath kind of organization. But this is actually recruiting people into the SS. Or the executive service, the SES. So it's just interesting that there are these kind of paid political, sort of in the old days, this would be like a union job where you never touch the steel. You just throw a steel worker off a roof every once in a while. But anyway, here's her background. She had the work in international affairs, then field operations on the border in El Paso. Okay, I don't know if she's related to Rubin or not, but he was a congressman for, I think, about 10 years or 20 years, actually, I think. And then here is border initiatives, okay, and then port and border. Now, the only problem I have with DHS since its formation back in 2002 is where did all these people come from? What was their background? I keep going back to, Mike McMahon of the FBI saying there was 660,000 people that came through that weren't checked. So I'm not saying that I'm focusing on any one SES person. I just think we need a complete background check ordered up now. And I think probably the guy to do it would be the new Secretary of State, which would be Mr. Pompeo, Mr. War College Pompeo, Mr. Head of his class at West Point Pompeo, Mr. Strategy. So again, I want to see all the 27 years in detail for everybody that's in SES, not just for this gal, but for everybody, because we have to root out. It's kind of like when Murder on the Orient Express, you have to ask, Hercule Poirot has to interview everybody on the train. Those are all the suspects. So right now, as far as the Navy drug business is concerned, we're going to just have to go through all 8,000 and find. Now, here is Will Levy, and he comes in, again, mainly a police background, a Navy police background, and then he gets made the CIO. And of course, what does he do? He brings in a chef, and he brings in flexible work.
Happy to be able to have someplace to go in and eat.
That definitely affects morale. You want a good meal, of course.
Absolutely. And we're pretty restrictive workforce as far as, coming and going, telework, alternate work schedules, the flexibility.
And again, for people printing money, it's kind of like, you're there to print the money. We don't really want you flexibly working, coming and going. Again, that could be a shadow illicit workforce down at the Navy Yard, a bunch of Navy cops down at the Navy Yard. We had that big shooting down at the Navy Yard. Is it from situations like this where we have SES and people that are doing things on the side? I'm not talking about Will Levy here. I'm just saying it's ripe. This is a situation that's ripe for these typical type of infiltrations. That's what I'm saying. Here's Ruben Hinojosa, and he was his went from McAllen on the Mexican border all the way to San Antonio. Yeah. So anyway, here she is. She's director of this post, I guess. I think this is a government position, paid position. She's still with the SES. Good for her, 27 years. I just want to see this kind of detailed resumes for all 8,000 or 9,100 SES employees. I guess that's the big point here. The Causey Award, he got this award, Mike Levy did, or Will Levy, and it's just a correspondent, just like me, who gave out the awards. But then it sounds like a Pulitzer, but it's just a guy who's he's just
look at
us all, and that's where the Causey Awards come from. So it's kind of a self-congratulatory type of thing. But one of the other Causey Award winners was this guy, Nick Nyack. And I remember Nick Nyack for him kind of taking over. He became the chief procurement officer at Homeland Security for 3 or 4 years. He also got a Causey Award. Now I want to look at all Causey Award winners, what they have in common. And I thought of immediately the 3 individuals, so we still don't have their name, that hacked in 2016, in March 2016, hacked the DHS. Now, they were the inspector general going in and inspecting. But if I had done a lot of small business work and I had done a lot of falsified sales through companies like Brilliant and Exact, I would go in and wipe out all the systems before I left for Pakistan. Is that what happened actually in March? I don't know, but we'll find out. So again, if anybody remembers the facility out here, the VA facility out here in New York, from my days looking at, I remember going to the Sandpoint Reserve and doing a video there, and I remember going to Oyster Bay and making a joke about F. Scott Fitzgerald and Little Egg and West Egg and East Egg and them looking across. I can't remember where they looked across at each other in the Gatsby. But anyway, so much for your literature reference. But it would be great if you could tell me where that one-on-one doctor was that was out here at the VA.